The old man sat alone in the corner of the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, shivering in a rain-soaked, tattered coat. To the manager, he was a stain on the restaurant's image, a vagrant who needed to be thrown out before the lunch rush. To the other diners, he was invisible. But to Audrey, a struggling waitress drowning in debt, he was just a human being who looked cold and hungry. She had no idea that the homeless man she was about to defend was Henri Delacroix, the elusive French tycoon who secretly owned the very building they were standing in. One act of kindness and one sentence spoken in perfect French was about to shatter her reality and destroy the people who had tormented her. The rain in New York City didn't just wash the streets. It seemed to beat the hope out of anyone walking below 14th Street without an umbrella. Inside L'Étoile d'Or, a restaurant so pretentious that they ironed the napkins twice, the storm was merely a backdrop for the clinking of crystal and the hushed gossip of the upper crust. Audrey tightened her apron, wincing as the knot pressed against her lower back. She had been on her feet for 9 hours straight. The lunch shift was transitioning into the early dinner rush, and her feet felt like they were bleeding inside her cheap, non-slip shoes. "Table 4 needs water, Audrey. Stop daydreaming," a voice sneered from the pass. It was Gavin, the floor manager. Gavin was a man who wore suits that were too tight and possessed a soul that was too small. He managed the restaurant like a dictator, treating the staff as disposable cogs and the wealthy patrons as gods. "On it, Gavin," Audrey said, keeping her head down. She grabbed the silver pitcher, the condensation cooling her burning palm. Audrey was 24, with dark circles under her eyes that concealer could no longer hide. She was smart, brilliant actually. She had a degree in art history from NYU and had spent a year studying at the Sorbonne in Paris. But degrees didn't pay for her mother's chemotherapy bills. Waitressing at L'Étoile d'Or did. Barely. As she moved through the dining room, navigating between tables occupied by hedge fund managers and Instagram models, the front door chimed. The hostess stand was empty. The hostess, a girl named Tiffany, who spent more time checking her makeup than checking reservations, was in the bathroom. A man walked in. He stopped the room. Not because he was striking, but because he didn't belong. He was elderly, perhaps in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. He wore a heavy, woolen coat that might have been navy blue once, but was now a faded, muddy grey. It was frayed at the cuffs and soaked through. He leaned heavily on a wooden cane. The chatter in the restaurant dipped in volume. A woman at table 6 audibly gasped and pulled her Chanel bag closer to her, as if the old man's poverty might be contagious. Audrey froze. She saw the way the man's hands shook as he tried to wipe the rain from his face. He looked exhausted, his eyes scanning the room with a mixture of confusion and defiance. Gavin stormed out from the kitchen, spotting the man instantly. His face turned a shade of purple usually reserved for bruised plums. He marched toward the entrance, his polished shoes clicking aggressively on the marble floor. "Excuse me," Gavin barked, not bothering to lower his voice. "Sir, you cannot be in here." The old man looked at Gavin, his eyes sharp and blue, contrasting with his ragged appearance. "I am hungry," he said. His voice was raspy, his accent thick and undeniable, but he spoke English. "This is a fine dining establishment," Gavin sneered, stepping into the man's personal space to intimidate him. "We have a dress code, and we certainly don't have tables for—" He looked the man up and down with disgust. "Vagrants. There is a shelter on 34th Street. Go there." The old man didn't move. He gripped his cane tighter. "I have money." "I don't care if you have a pocket full of quarters," Gavin spat. "You are scaring the customers. Get out before I call the police." Audrey felt a heat rise in her chest. It was the same heat she felt when the debt collectors called her mother, the same heat she felt when she looked at her bank account balance. It was the burning sense of injustice. She dropped the water pitcher on a service station, a little too loudly, and walked over. "Gavin," Audrey said, her voice shaking slightly, but her chin held high. Gavin whipped his head around. "Get back to your section, Audrey." "Table 9 is open," Audrey said, ignoring his command. "It's in the corner. It's secluded. He won't bother anyone." "He is bothering me," Gavin hissed. "I'll serve him," Audrey insisted. "It's raining, Gavin. He's an old man. If we kick him out into this storm and he falls, think of the PR nightmare if someone films it." She knew the only language Gavin spoke was self-preservation. The mention of PR caused him to pause. He looked at the diners, some of whom were indeed watching, phones in hand. Gavin gritted his teeth. "Fine," he whispered venomously. "Put him in the back corner. But if he can't pay, the bill comes out of your tips, Audrey. Every cent. And if he makes a mess, you're cleaning it with a toothbrush." "Deal," Audrey said. She turned to the old man and offered a gentle smile, a stark contrast to Gavin's scowl. "Right this way, monsieur. Let's get you out of those wet things." The old man looked at her. For a second, the harshness in his eyes softened. He nodded once and followed her to the small, two-top table in the shadowed corner near the kitchen doors. Audrey helped the man out of his heavy, soaked coat. As she took it, she was surprised by the weight of it. Despite the fraying fabric, the lining felt like silk, though it was old and worn. She hung it carefully on a nearby rack. "Thank you," the man grumbled as he sat down. He looked uncomfortable, his joints clearly aching from the dampness. "Can I start you off with something warm?" Audrey asked, ignoring the menu. She knew the prices here. A soup was 28 $28. "We have a wonderful onion soup today. It'll warm you right up." The man looked at her suspiciously. "The soup," he muttered. "Is it real onion soup? Or that American sludge with too much salt and cheap cheese?" Audrey suppressed a laugh. "The chef uses Gruyere, aged 6 months, and the broth simmers for 12 hours. It's good, I promise." He waved a hand dismissively. "Fine, and water. No ice. Sparkling or still? Sparkling. San Pellegrino. If you have it." "We do." Audrey rushed to the kitchen. When she punched in the order, Gavin was standing at the pass, checking the tickets. He saw the order for table 9. "San Pellegrino?" Gavin laughed cruelly. "Don't open the bottle, Audrey. Make him pay first. I bet he thinks it's free tap water." "I'll cover it," Audrey snapped, grabbing the cold green bottle. "You're pathetic," Gavin muttered. "Playing Mother Teresa to a hobo. You know he's probably drunk, right?" Audrey ignored him and headed back to the floor. When she arrived at table 9, the old man had taken a small, leather-bound notebook from his pocket. He was scribbling furiously with a fountain pen. She poured the water into a crystal glass. He didn't look up. "Here you are," she said softly. He took a sip, then grimaced. He looked at the menu on the table, which he had opened. He began muttering under his breath, shaking his head. Audrey lingered for a moment, adjusting the cutlery. She caught the words he was whispering. "Incroyable! Ils ne savent même pas écrire bœuf bourguignon. Il manque le U. Des amateurs. Incredible. They don't even know how to spell bœuf bourguignon. The U is missing. Amateur." Audrey smiled involuntarily. She couldn't help herself. "C'est une faute de frappe sur les nouveaux menus," she replied quietly, her accent flawless, owned by months of living in the Latin Quarter of Paris. "J'ai essayé de le dire au patron, mais il n'écoute jamais." "It's a typo on the new menus. I tried to tell the boss, but he never listens." The old man froze. The pen stopped moving. He slowly lifted his head, looking at Audrey with a completely different expression. The suspicion was gone, replaced by shock and a piercing curiosity. "Vous parlez français?" he asked, his voice stronger now. "You speak French?" "Oui, un peu," Audrey replied humbly. "J'ai étudié l'histoire de l'art à Paris. C'était la meilleure année de ma vie." "Yes, a little. I studied art history in Paris. It was the best year of my life." The old man leaned back, studying her face. "You studied art history, yet you are here, serving water to a grumpy old man in a place run by imbeciles?" Audrey shrugged, a sad smile playing on her lips. "Life happens. My mother got sick. Paris is expensive. New York is expensive. But the doctors are here." The old man's eyes narrowed, analyzing her. He wasn't looking at her uniform or her tired eyes anymore. He was looking at her. "What is your name?" he asked, switching back to English but with a softer tone. Audrey Miller." "Audrey," he tested the name. "Like Hepburn, but she was British. You have a French soul, Audrey." "And you, monsieur?" Audrey asked boldly. "Do you have a name?" "Henri," he said simply. "Well, Henri," Audrey said, "the soup will be out in a moment. I'll make sure the chef doesn't put too much salt in it." For the first time, Henri smiled. It was a crooked, guarded smile, but it was genuine. "Merci, Audrey." As Audrey walked away, she felt a strange sense of relief. For 5 minutes, she hadn't felt like a servant. She felt like a person. She didn't notice Gavin watching from the shadows, his eyes narrowing, as he calculated how to get rid of the eyesore in the corner. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere in L'Étoile d'Or shifted. The heavy oak doors swung open, and a hush fell over the room that was different from when Henri had entered. This was the hush of reverence, not disgust. Enter Chad and Tiffany. Chad was the son of a prominent real estate mogul, a man who thought wearing sunglasses indoors was a personality trait. Tiffany was a social media influencer with 3 million followers and a reputation for destroying businesses with a single tweet if they didn't give her free meals. They were Gavin's favorite type of customers, rich, loud, and requiring constant ego stroking. Gavin practically sprinted to the door. "Mr. Kensington, Ms. Lacroix, exquisite to see you. We have your usual table ready." He gestured toward the center of the room, the prime spot to be seen. Chad frowned, pulling down his sunglasses. "Nah, Gavin, not today. Tiff wants privacy. We're filming a day in the life vlog. We need the corner booth. The lighting is better." Gavin froze. The corner booth was table 9. Henry was currently sitting there, halfway through his onion soup, reading his notebook. "Ah," Gavin stammered. "The corner booth is currently occupied, Mr. Kensington, but table 4 has excellent light and—" Tiffany pulled out her phone and started recording Gavin. "So, are you saying we can't sit where we want? Because I can totally tell my followers that L'Étoile d'Or is declining in service." Beads of sweat formed on Gavin's forehead. He looked at Chad, then at Tiffany's phone, and finally at Henri in the corner. The choice was obvious to him. A homeless-looking old man versus the city's golden couple. "Give me 1 moment," Gavin said, smoothing his jacket. He marched over to table 9. Audrey was just refilling Henri's water glass. They were laughing quietly about a story Henri was telling about the pigeons in the Tuileries garden. "Excuse me," Gavin interrupted, his voice icy. Audrey looked up, her smile fading. "Yes, Gavin?" "Sir," Gavin addressed Henri, "I'm afraid there has been a mistake with the reservation system. This table is reserved for a VIP party who just arrived. You'll need to leave." Henri slowly lowered his spoon. He dabbed his mouth with the napkin, the cloth napkin he had used with surprising elegance. "I am eating," Henri said calmly. I will pack your soup to go, Gavin said, snapping his fingers for a busboy. But we need the table, now. Gavin, you can't be serious, Audrey interjected, stepping between the manager and the table. He's not finished. There are plenty of other tables. Not for Mr. Kensington, Gavin hissed at her. Then he turned his full aggression toward Henry. Look, buddy, I let you in out of pity. Don't make me regret it. Here's $20. Take your soup and get out. Gavin pulled a $20 bill from his pocket and threw it onto the table. It landed in the bread basket. The insult was physical. It hung in the air like smoke. Henry looked at the money, then up at Gavin. The blue eyes were no longer soft. They were steel. You are offering me money to leave? Henry asked quietly. I'm paying you to stop polluting my restaurant, Gavin said. Henry stood up. He was taller than he looked when seated. He grabbed his cane. Audrey, Henry said, his voice level. Is the bill settled? No, I haven't printed it yet, Audrey stammered, horrified. Henry, please, you don't have to. I will not stay where I am not wanted, Henry said. He reached into the inner pocket of his tattered coat. Yeah, dig for change. Chad Kensington laughed from across the room. He and Tiffany had walked over to watch the drama. Tiffany was live streaming. Oh my God, look at his coat. Is that from the dumpster? Tiffany giggled. Henry ignored them. He pulled out a wallet. It wasn't a Velcro wallet or a plastic bag. It was black alligator leather with a gold crest on the corner. He opened it and pulled out a card. It wasn't a credit card. It was a heavy, black metal card with no numbers, just a chip and a signature. It was the Centurion card, the real black card, invite only, usually reserved for royalty and billionaires. He placed it gently on the table next to Gavin's $20 bill. Add a $1,000 tip for Audrey, Henry said to Gavin, and charge the full price of the soup. Gavin stared at the card. He blinked. He knew what that card was, but his brain couldn't reconcile the card with the coat. This is probably stolen, Gavin sputtered, his face flushing red. You stole this. Run it, Henry challenged. If it declines, you can call the police. If it goes through, you will apologize to Audrey. To Audrey? Gavin laughed nervously. Why would I apologize to the waitress? Because, Henry said, leaning in close, she is the only person in this building who knows the value of dignity. Gavin snatched the card and ran to the POS terminal. His hands were shaking. Chad and Tiffany were snickering. He's totally going to get arrested, Tiffany whispered to her phone. Live drama, guys. Gavin swiped the card. Authorization approved. Gavin stared at the screen. The machine didn't even hesitate. He walked back to the table, his face pale. He handed the card back to Henry with 2 fingers, as if it were radioactive. It went through, Gavin whispered. Good, Henry said. He pocketed the card. He didn't look at Gavin. He looked at Audrey. Thank you for the meal, Audrey, and for the conversation. You have a good accent. Keep practicing. Henry turned to leave, grabbing his coat. Wait, Gavin shouted, suddenly realizing the gravity of the mistake he might have made. But his ego was still driving him. You still have to leave. We have standards here. Henry stopped at the door. He turned around and looked at the entire room, at Gavin, at Chad, at Tiffany, and finally at the terrified staff. Standards, Henry repeated. We shall see about your standards. He walked out into the rain. Good riddance, Gavin muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. He turned to Audrey. You. In my office. Now. What? Audrey asked. You embarrassed a VIP client by seating that trash in their booth, and you wasted 20 minutes chatting with him. You're fired, Audrey. Get your stuff and get out. Audrey felt the world drop out from under her. Gavin, you can't. My mum. I need this insurance." "Should have thought of that before you decided to run a soup kitchen in a 5-star restaurant," Gavin sneered. "Out, or I'll have security drag you out." Tears stung Audrey's eyes. She untied her apron, threw it on the floor, and walked out the back door into the alleyway. She stood in the rain, crying, the water mixing with her tears. She had just lost her livelihood because she was kind to an old man. "Audrey," a voice called out from the shadows of the alley. A black car, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, idled at the curb. The rear window rolled down. It was Henry. But he wasn't wearing the tattered coat anymore. He had taken it off to reveal a bespoke charcoal suit that likely cost more than Audrey made in a year. "Get in," Henry said. "We have business to discuss." The interior of the Rolls-Royce Phantom was a sanctuary of silence. The drumming of the New York rain against the reinforced glass sounded miles away. The air smelled of expensive leather and a hint of cedarwood. Audrey sat on the edge of the plush seat, dripping wet. Her cheap waitress uniform was clinging to her skin, and her hair was plastered to her forehead. She shivered, not just from the cold, but from the terrifying proximity to wealth she couldn't comprehend. Henri Delacroix pressed a button, and a partition slid up, separating them from the driver. He opened a compartment and pulled out a thick, dry towel, handing it to her. "Dry yourself," he commanded gently. "You are shaking." "Who are you?" Audrey asked, her voice trembling as she took the towel. "People with holes in their coats don't have cars like this." Henry chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "That coat is a costume, Audrey, a necessary one. My name is Henri Delacroix. I own the Delacroix Group." Audrey stopped wiping her face. The towel froze in her hands. She knew the name. Everyone in the hospitality and luxury industry knew the name. The Delacroix Group owned hotels in Dubai, vineyards in Bordeaux, shipping lines in the Mediterranean, and, crucially, the building that housed l'Étoile d'Or. "You own the restaurant?" Audrey whispered. "I own the block," Henri corrected. "And I have been hearing disturbing reports about my New York properties. Profits were high, but customer satisfaction scores were plummeting. I wanted to see why. I didn't want the red carpet treatment. I wanted the truth. So I dressed as a man who had nothing." He looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets. "I learned a great deal today. I learned that my manager is a tyrant. I learned that my clientele has become tasteless. And I learned that I have exactly one employee with a backbone and a heart." He turned his gaze back to Audrey. "You lost your job because of me. For that, I apologize, but I am prepared to offer you a new one." Audrey laughed bitterly, a sound that surprised even her. "A new one? Unless you need a waitress in your mansion, I don't think I'm qualified, Monsieur Delacroix. I have an art history degree and a negative bank balance. I need quick cash, not a charity case." "This is not charity," Henri snapped, his voice sharpening. "I despise charity. Charity is giving a man a fish. Business is teaching him to own the lake. I need an assistant. My current executive assistant is retiring to the south of Spain next week. I need someone who speaks French, who understands art because half my assets are in paintings, and who isn't afraid to stand up to bullies." He reached into a leather briefcase next to him and pulled out a contract. It was thick. "The salary is $120,000 a year. Full benefits, and a signing bonus of $20,000, payable immediately." Audrey felt all the air leave her lungs. 120? Is that insufficient?" Henry raised an eyebrow. "I can go to 150 if you agree to handle my travel itinerary." "No," Audrey gasped. "I mean, yes, Why me? You saw me for 20 minutes. I saw you defend the defenseless, Henry said softly. In my world, Audrey, everyone is wearing a mask. Everyone wants my money. Everyone agrees with me. It is exhausting. You told Gavin he was wrong. You corrected my French grammar. You have integrity. Integrity cannot be bought. It must be found. And I found it in a soup bowl. He pulled a gold Mont Blanc pen from his pocket and held it out. But there is a condition, Henry added, his eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. What condition? Audrey asked, hesitating. We are going to teach Mr. Gavin and his VIPs a lesson, a permanent one. You will not just be my assistant. For the next week you will act as my proxy. We are going to restructure L'Etoile d'Or, and you are going to be the one to wield the axe. Audrey looked at the contract, then at the pen, and finally at Henri. She thought of Gavin's smug face as he fired her. She thought of Chad and Tiffany laughing at her. She thought of her mother's medical bills piling up on the kitchen counter. She took the pen. Where do I sign? The next week was a blur of activity that felt more like a dream sequence than real life. The signing bonus hit Audrey's account the next morning. The first thing she did was pay her mother's outstanding hospital bills. The relief she felt when the past due notifications turned into paid in full receipts was intoxicating. She cried in the shower for 20 minutes, washing away months of accumulated stress. Then, the work began. Henry didn't just give her a job. He gave her a crash course in power. He set her up in a corporate apartment in Midtown so she could be closer to the office. He hired a stylist, not to make her look like a model, but to make her look like a shark. No more aprons, Henry said, critiquing a rack of clothes brought to his penthouse office. She needs structure, shoulders, sharp lines. When she walks into a room, I want people to worry they are about to be sued. They settled on a wardrobe of tailored power suits in creams, navies, and charcoal greys. With her hair cut into a sleek, sharp bob, and her posture corrected by a deportment coach Henri insisted on, Audrey didn't look like the girl who scraped leftovers off plates anymore. She looked like the woman who owned the restaurant. While Audrey underwent her transformation, Henri was setting the stage at L'Etoile d'Or. He sent a memo to Gavin, under the Delacroix Group letterhead, announcing a strategic review gala. The memo stated that the global chairman would be visiting to assess the restaurant's performance, and that Gavin was to invite the restaurant's top 50 influential clients for an exclusive complimentary dinner. Gavin took the bait hook, line, and sinker. Audrey monitored Gavin's emails from her new laptop in Henry's office. He's panicking, Audrey said, scrolling through the messages. He spent $50,000 on flowers alone. He's trying to buy his way into a good review. Let him spend, Henri said, sipping an espresso. It is his budget he is blowing. It will only make the insolvency report look worse. He invited Chad and Tiffany, Audrey noted, her finger hovering over the guest list. They are seated at the head table. Perfect, Henry said. The stage is set. The night before the gala, Henry called Audrey into his office. He looked tired. The rainy day in the restaurant hadn't just been an act. He really was old, and his health was failing. Audrey, he said, motioning for her to sit. Tomorrow night, I will not be doing the talking. You will. Me? Audrey widened her eyes. But they know me. They'll recognize me. Will they? Henry smiled sadly. People like Gavin and Chad, they never really saw you, Audrey. They saw a uniform. They saw a servant. Tomorrow, you will not be wearing a uniform. You will be wearing the truth. I want you to deliver the keynote speech. I want you to fire Gavin. Publicly? Publicly, Henry confirmed. He humiliated you in front of the world. The scales must be balanced. It is not vengeance, Audrey. It is justice. If we fire him quietly, he will just go to another restaurant and abuse another waitress. We must expose him." Audrey swallowed hard. She wasn't a vindictive person by nature, but she remembered the way Gavin had looked at Henry, like he was garbage. She remembered the fear in the other staff members' eyes. "Okay," Audrey said, her voice firm. "I'll do it." The evening of the Strategic Review Gala arrived, and L'Etoile d'Or had been transformed into a palace of desperate opulence. Gavin had spared no expense, mostly because it wasn't his money he was spending. The air was thick with the scent of 5,000 white Casablanca lilies, imported that morning from Holland. A string quartet, positioned on a raised dais in the corner, played a melancholic rendition of Vivaldi, struggling to be heard over the din of New York's elite. Gavin stood by the grand entrance, vibrating with a manic energy. He checked his reflection in the glass of the maitre d' stand for the 10th time. His tuxedo was midnight blue, his hair gelled into a helmet of perfection, but his eyes betrayed a profound panic. He knew the global chairman was coming. He knew his numbers for the quarter were shaky. This night had to be perfect. He snapped his fingers at a passing busboy. "Tuck your shirt in," he hissed. "If I see one wrinkle, you're fired. Do you understand? Fired!" The busboy scurried away, terrified. Gavin wiped a bead of sweat from his upper lip. He scanned the room. It was full. The top 50 influential clients were all there. In the center of the room, occupying the prime real estate, sat Chad Kensington and Tiffany Lacroix. They were the crown jewels of Gavin's guest list. Chad was loudly recounting a story about his yacht in Ibiza, while Tiffany was live streaming the table setting, holding her phone light perilously close to the candle flame. "Guys, the ambience is giving old money," Tiffany whispered to her 3 million followers. "Gavin, the manager, literally worships us. We are VIPs for life." The grandfather clock by the bar struck 8:00 p.m. A hush fell over the room as the heavy oak double doors swung open. Gavin straightened his spine, plastering on his most obsequious smile. He expected an entourage of lawyers. He expected an old man in a wheelchair. He did not expect the woman in red. Audrey entered the room like a blade, cutting through silk. She wore a bespoke crimson pantsuit, tailored so sharply it looked like it had been sculpted onto her body. The color was bold, aggressive, the color of blood and power. Her hair, previously pulled back in a messy bun, was now a sleek, architectural bob that framed her face. She wore no jewelry, except for a pair of simple diamond studs. She didn't need accessories. Her posture was the statement. Behind her, flanked by 2 towering security guards in black suits, walked Henri Delacroix. He was in a classic tuxedo, leaning heavily on his cane, his face an unreadable mask of stone. The room went silent. The chatter died instantly. Even the string quartet faltered for a beat. Gavin blinked. He squinted. His brain struggled to process the image. The woman looked familiar, yet completely alien. She walked with a predator's confidence, her gold stiletto heels striking the marble floor with a rhythmic, authoritative clack, clack, clack. Gavin rushed forward, bowing low. "Monsieur Delacroix, welcome, welcome. We are humbled by your presence." He turned his beaming, sweaty face toward Audrey. "And, Mademoiselle? I don't believe we've had the pleasure formally. I am Gavin, the general manager." Audrey stopped. She looked down at him. The last time she had seen this man, she was looking up at him from the floor, picking up a dropped napkin while he screamed at her. "The pleasure is all yours, Gavin," she said. Her voice was cool, crisp, and terrifyingly calm. Gavin's smile faltered. There was something in her tone, a familiarity that sent a shiver down his spine. "I have set up a podium for the chairman's address," he stammered, gesturing to the small stage. "If you would like a drink first. Some champagne. It's a 2008 Dom Perignon." "We're not here to drink, Gavin," Audrey said. "We're here to review the assets." She walked past him, ignoring his offer, and ascended the stairs to the stage. Henri remained on the floor, standing like a sentinel near the bar. Audrey stood behind the podium. She didn't smile. She adjusted the microphone, the feedback whine making a few guests wince. She looked out at the sea of faces, the bankers, the models, the influencers. She saw Chad and Tiffany staring at her, whispering confusedly. "Who is that?" Chad asked, loud enough for the front tables to hear. "Is she a model?" "I don't know," Tiffany replied, zooming her camera in. "But look at that suit. That's custom Givenchy. Has to be." Audrey tapped the microphone twice. Thump, thump. "Good evening," she began. "My name is Audrey Miller." A ripple of confusion went through the back of the room where the staff was lined up. The chef, a large man named Marco, dropped his ladle. A waitress named Claire gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Gavin, standing near the front, froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. Audrey Miller. "No," he whispered to himself, shaking his head. "It can't be." "Some of you look confused," Audrey continued, her eyes locking onto Gavin's pale face. "You might not recognize me without my apron. You see, 7 days ago, I was working right there." She pointed to the corner station. Table 9. The murmurs grew louder. The wealthy guests looked at each other. A waitress? Addressing the Delacroix Gala? "I was the server you snapped your fingers at," Audrey said, her voice gathering strength. "I was the one who cleaned up your spills. And most importantly, I was the one fired by your general manager for the crime of serving soup to a hungry man." She gestured to the large projection screen behind her, which Gavin had set up to display a slideshow of the restaurant's profits. "Gavin prepared a presentation tonight about the excellence of l'Étoile d'Or," Audrey said. "But Monsieur Delacroix and I decided to make some edits. We thought you should see the real day-to-day operations." Audrey pressed a button on the tablet she was holding. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was high-definition security footage from the previous week. The room watched in stunned silence. On screen, Henri Delacroix, wet, shivering and dressed in rags, entered the restaurant. Gavin's voice boomed through the speakers, distorted but unmistakable. "Get out before I call the police. You are scaring the customers." The crowd gasped. A woman at table 3 put her hand over her heart. The video cut to table 9. It showed Audrey gently taking Henry's coat. It showed her bringing him water when Gavin refused. Then it cut to the VIP table. Tiffany's voice rang out, shrill and cruel. "Oh my God, look at his coat! Is that from the dumpster?" Chad's laughter followed. "Yeah, dig for change." On the floor, Tiffany shrieked and grabbed her phone, trying to hide it. Chad sank so low in his chair he practically vanished under the table. The video reached its climax. Gavin stormed over, threw a $20 bill into the breadbasket, and sneered at Henri. "I'm paying you to stop polluting my restaurant." Then, the firing. The way Gavin pointed at the door. The way Audrey walked out into the rain, crying. The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of Gavin's lungs. He felt 500 eyes boring into his back. Audrey looked down at him. "Gavin," she said, "step forward." He couldn't move. His legs felt like lead. "Step forward," Henri barked from the back of the room. The authority in his voice was undeniable. Gavin stumbled toward the stage, his hands shaking uncontrollably. This is a misunderstanding," he squeaked, sweat pouring down his face, ruining his makeup. "I was protecting the brand. He looked like a vagrant. How was I supposed to know?" "You were supposed to be a human being," Audrey said simply. "But cruelty wasn't your only mistake, was it, Gavin?" Gavin's eyes widened. "What?" Audrey tapped the tablet again. A new image appeared on the screen. It was a bank statement. "We've had forensic accountants going through the books for the last 5 days," Audrey announced. "It seems that while you were busy policing the dress code, you were also busy moving money. Specifically, 20% of the tips meant for the kitchen staff, and 15% of the wine budget." The staff gasped. Marco the chef took a step forward, his face turning red with rage. "You stole our tips!" he roared. "It's a lie!" Gavin screamed, backing away. "She's lying! She's just a bitter waitress trying to ruin me." "The transfers went to an account under your name in the Cayman Islands," Audrey said, reading from the screen. "Total misappropriated funds, $350,000 over 2 years. Audrey looked toward the kitchen doors. "Officers?" 2 NYPD officers stepped out. They weren't smiling. Gavin looked left, then right. He saw the disgust on the faces of his VIP clients. He saw the fury in the eyes of the staff he had bullied. He realized with terrifying clarity that his reign was over. "No, please," Gavin begged, as the officers grabbed his arms. "I can explain. Monsieur Delacroix, Henri, please." Henri didn't even look at him. He was watching Audrey with pride. "You are terminated, effective immediately," Audrey said, her voice ringing out like a judge's gavel. "For cause. There will be no severance. There will be no reference. There will only be a court date." As the officers handcuffed Gavin and dragged him, weeping and pleading out of the ballroom, the room remained silent for 1 heartbeat longer. Then, a single clap echoed. It was Marco. He was clapping his large, flour-dusted hands. Then Claire the waitress joined in. Then the busboys. The applause swelled like a wave. It wasn't polite golf claps. It was a thunderous ovation. Even the wealthy guests, realizing the tide had turned and wanting to be on the right side of history, stood up and cheered. Audrey stood on the stage, the red suit blazing under the spotlight, watching the man who tried to break her get dragged away into the night. She didn't smile. She just nodded, once. Justice had been served, but she wasn't done yet. Her eyes shifted to table 1, to Chad and Tiffany. "Now," Audrey said into the microphone, silencing the room once more. "Let's discuss our VIPs." The applause for Gavin's arrest eventually faded, settling into a heavy, expectant silence. The air in l'Étoile d'Or was electric, charged with the kind of tension that usually precedes a thunderstorm, but the storm had already broken. Now came the flood. Audrey didn't return to the shadows. She descended the small stage, her red suit catching the light like armor. She didn't look at the staff, nor at the other guests who were now nervously sipping their water, afraid to make eye contact. Her gaze was fixed on a single target. Table 1, the VIP table. Chad Kensington and Tiffany Lacroix were frozen. Tiffany had lowered her phone, the screen finally dark. The live stream had ended, but the reality of their situation was just beginning. Chad sat deep in his high-backed chair, tugging at his bow tie as if it were suddenly a noose. Audrey stopped directly in front of their table. The clacking of her heels ceased, replaced by the sound of Chad's rapid breathing. "Mr. Kensington." "Ms. Lacroix," Audrey said, her voice deceptively polite. It was the same tone she used to use when telling a customer the kitchen was out of specials. Calm, professional, and final. Chad looked up, his face a mask of sweating panic and lingering arrogance. He tried to muster a smile, but it looked like a grimace. Look, Audrey, right? We didn't know. Honestly, it was just a joke, a misunderstanding. A joke, Audrey repeated, letting the word hang in the air. Is that what you call it? Mocking an elderly man for his coat? Betting on whether he was digging for change? We were just having fun, Tiffany blurted out, her voice shrill. She grabbed her Chanel bag as if it were a shield. You have to understand, it's content. It's what our followers want. We didn't mean any harm. We can delete the video. I'll delete it right now. She fumbled with her phone, her manicured fingernails tapping frantically against the glass screen. The video has already been saved by our legal team, Henri Delacroix said. He had moved silently to stand beside Audrey, his presence looming large despite his reliance on the cane. Defamation, harassment, it is all documented. Chad slammed his hand on the table, the silver cutlery rattling. The fear was turning into aggression, the last resort of a bully cornered. Now listen here, Chad snapped, pointing a trembling finger at Henry. You might own the building, old man, but you don't own me. Do you have any idea who my father is? He is Robert Kensington. He owns Kensington Capital. He could buy this restaurant 10 times over and turn it into a parking lot just to spite you. The room gasped. A few diners whispered to one another. Everyone knew Robert Kensington. He was a shark in the financial world, a man known for destroying businesses that crossed him. Henry didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He slowly reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a slim, black smartphone. He tapped the screen once and held it out so Chad could see. Robert Kensington, Henry mused. Yes, we spoke this morning, at 9:00 a.m., to be precise. Chad frowned, confused. You spoke to my dad. We discussed the liquidity issues Kensington Capital has been facing, Henry said, his voice smooth as silk. It seems your father over-leveraged his assets in the Asian markets. He was desperate for a bailout. He was looking for a buyer for the mortgage division to save the rest of his empire. Henry paused, a small, cold smile playing on his lips. I bought it, Chad. The paperwork was finalized an hour ago. Technically speaking, through a series of holding companies, I am now the majority shareholder of the entity that funds your trust fund. The color drained from Chad's face so completely he looked like a wax statue. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The threat of his father's power had evaporated, replaced by the crushing weight of the man standing in front of him. You own my trust fund, Chad whispered. I control the purse strings, Henry corrected, and I have a very low tolerance for spoiled children who abuse my staff. Tiffany let out a sob, realizing the gravity of the situation. Please, we'll do anything. We'll pay for everyone's dinner tonight. Just don't ban us. If we get banned from the Delacroix Group, we can't go to Fashion Week in Paris. We can't stay at the Ritz in London. It would ruin my brand. Audrey looked at the weeping influencer and the broken air. A week ago, their laughter had made her feel small. Now, their desperation just made her feel tired. She didn't want their money. She wanted them to understand what it felt like to be invisible. You aren't banned, Audrey said softly. Chad's head snapped up. Hope flickered in his eyes. We aren't? No, Audrey said. That would be too easy. You just go to another restaurant and treat the staff there like garbage. We believe in rehabilitation here. She turned and pointed a manicured finger toward the swinging metal doors at the back of the room, the entrance to the kitchen. The dishwashing team is short-staffed tonight, Audrey announced, her voice carrying to the back of the room. The usual crew is currently in the wine cellar, selecting a celebratory vintage. There is a mountain of pots and pans back there. Crusted cheese, burnt sauce, grease. Chad stared at the doors in horror. You can't be serious. Dead serious, Henry added. 3 hours, no gloves, no phones. You clean every plate in the house. If you finish, you remain welcome at my properties. If you walk out that front door now, you are blacklisted globally. Forever. The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Social death or 3 hours of manual labor. Chad looked at his hands, soft, uncalloused, used to holding nothing heavier than a champagne flute. Then he looked at the terrified faces of the other diners watching him. He realized he had no choice. Slowly, painfully, Chad stood up. He took off his tuxedo jacket and tossed it onto the chair. Fine, he spat, though his voice lacked any venom. Where's the soap? Tiffany wailed. But my manicure! As she grabbed her bag and followed Chad, head hung low, toward the kitchen. As the kitchen door swung shut behind them, cutting off Tiffany's cries, a singular sound broke the silence. The chef, a burly man named Marco, who had suffered Gavin's tyranny for years, started clapping. Then the sous chefs joined in, then the waiters. Finally, the guests, the bankers, the models, the elites, joined the ovation. It wasn't just applause for justice, it was a release of pressure. The tyrant was gone. The bullies were washing dishes. The world, for once, made sense. Open the Chateau Margaux, Henri commanded the sommelier, waving his hand. For everyone, staff included. Put it on my tab. The rest of the night blurred into a surreal celebration. The strict hierarchy of L'Étoile d'Or dissolved. Busboys sat in velvet booths drinking wine that cost more than their monthly rent. Wealthy patrons approached Audrey not to demand service, but to shake her hand, suddenly eager to prove they weren't like Chad or Gavin. Audrey moved through the room like a ghost, smiling, accepting gratitude, but feeling a strange detachment. She wasn't the waitress anymore, but she wasn't one of them either. At 1 a.m. the restaurant was finally empty. The last guest had stumbled out into the cool night air. Even Chad and Tiffany had been released, slipping out the back door, soaked in grey dishwater, their egos bruised beyond repair. Audrey found Henry sitting at table 9, the corner table where it all began. The restaurant was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerators and the soft patter of rain which had started again outside. Henry looked exhausted. His face was pale, the adrenaline of the evening wearing off to reveal the frailty of his age. You did well, Audrey, he said softly, gesturing for her to sit. You held the room. You have the presence. Audrey sat down, her body aching with a different kind of fatigue than she was used to. I felt sick, she admitted, pouring herself a glass of water. I didn't enjoy hurting them. Seeing Chad look so small. It wasn't the victory I thought it would be. That is exactly why you are the right person, Henry said, leaning forward on his elbows. A leader who enjoys the pain of others is a tyrant. That was Gavin. A leader who feels the weight of judgment, who hesitates to wield the sword. That is a guardian. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He placed it on the white tablecloth between them. I am returning to France tomorrow, Henry announced. My jet leaves at noon. The doctors, they say I need rest, real rest. I cannot run the North American division anymore. The sharks are circling, and I am too old to fight them off. Audrey looked at him, alarm rising in her chest. But who will run it? You can't trust the board. I don't trust the board, Henry said. I trust you. He pushed the velvet box toward her. Audrey opened it. Inside sat a lapel pin made of platinum and sapphire, the family crest of the Delacroix dynasty. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a badge of office. Henri, Audrey breathed, her hand trembling. I can't, I'm 24. I was a waitress last week. I don't know how to run a conglomerate. You can hire people to count the beans, Audrey, Henry said passionately. "You can hire lawyers to read the contracts, but you cannot hire a soul. You cannot teach someone to see the invisible people. When I sat here in my rags, 500 people ignored me. You saw me. You defended me." He reached out and covered her hand with his cold, wrinkled one. "Business is not about money. It is about people. You speak the language of humanity. That is the only qualification that matters to me now. Will you do it? Will you take care of my legacy?" Audrey looked at the pin, gleaming under the dim house lights. She thought of her mother, who would never have to worry about a bill again. She thought of the staff, laughing and drinking wine tonight, safe from abuse. She realized that power didn't have to be a weapon. It could be a shield. She took a deep breath, picked up the pin, and fastened it to the lapel of her red suit. It felt heavy, but it felt right. "I won't let you down, Henri," she whispered. Henri smiled, and the years seemed to melt away from his face. "Alors, au travail." "So to work," he said. "Oui, au travail," Audrey replied, a genuine smile breaking through her exhaustion. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. Audrey and Henry both jumped, then looked toward the swinging doors. "I believe," Henry said, his eyes twinkling, "that Mr. Kensington has dropped another plate." Audrey started to laugh. It started as a giggle and grew into a full belly laugh. The sound of relief, of victory, and of a future that was finally, beautifully, her own. Henry joined in, his raspy chuckle mixing with hers. It was the perfect ending to the shift from hell and the first moment of the rest of her life. Audrey's life changed not because she was lucky, but because she remained human in a world that rewarded cruelty. She went on to lead the Delacroix Group into a new era of ethical luxury, proving that you don't have to be ruthless to be powerful. Gavin was found guilty of embezzlement and never worked in hospitality again. As for Chad and Tiffany, they learned the hard way that influence isn't about followers. It's about character. The story of the Waitress and the Billionaire became a legend in New York, a reminder that you never know who you are speaking to, and that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one sitting quietly in the corner, wearing a tattered coat. What would you have done if you were in Audrey's shoes? Would you have stood up to your boss to help a stranger? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about the underdog winning big. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.